Are you developing IoT solutions? Get ready for tomorrow with Farnell, supporting your design journey from connecting smart sensors to the cloud to implementing AI. Find everything you need at farnell.com. Enjoy this episode with Farnell, a global distributor of electronic products and solutions.
Hello and welcome to the AV Forums podcast for Monday, the 13th of June. You haven't seen us for 2 weeks. It's just the way that it's worked out. If you ever need to know when the podcast is on, it's the second and fourth Mondays of the month. And some months are longer than others, so we've actually had 2 weeks off. It's been grand. There's no movies podcast tonight as well. So if you're hanging around for the movies podcast, it's not coming tonight. But we will talk about some of the things that we have been watching a little bit later in this podcast. So stick around for that. But the movies guys will be back on the 27th. So if you want to hear all of that shenanigans, then tune in on the 27th for the movies podcast. But we're here for at least an hour tonight. And joining me, as always, is Ed Selley.
Evening, Phil.
Ian Collen.
Good evening.
And Julian Scott.
Evening from me.
Welcome back along. We've got lots to get through tonight. So before we talk about what we've been up to over the last 2 weeks that we haven't been around, there are current competitions coming up. We have some previous competition winners. Ed will be reading all that out. We've got some news to get through, some sad news about Auro 3D today, so we're going to talk about that. We've also got a couple of hi-fi news stories to get through. I'm also going to give you a quick roundup of the Panorama 3 soundbar from Bowers & Wilkins. There's been a firmware update for the Samsung S95B QDOLED in the UK. I have a UK sample. I will give you an update on that as well because it's changed a couple of things and it means it's going to delay our review by a little margin of time while I retest everything again just to make sure everything stays as it should be. Ed's going to look at some key acoustic speakers. We're going to talk about Gamma PQ EOTF tonight in our calibration discussion. And of course, to wrap up, as always, Ed's going to do his album final and playlist. And we're going to discuss what we have been watching on the telly box, if anything at all. So that's what's coming up tonight. But what we've been up to in the last 2 weeks, Ed.
Do you know what, Phil? I don't know if anyone else has noticed this, but everything's got really expensive.
Yeah, just
everything. So actually, I've been doing some walking, and you're going to laugh at me here. I have been doing more walking. It's different walking to you, Phil. I walk in exclusively urban environments, so I haven't felt the urge for specialist walking shoes. But neither do I want to wear out my various pairs of trainers. So I have actually rotated them quite carefully.
Surely you have enough trainers to walk every day of the week.
Well, yes, I do, but I don't want to wear the ones I have out. And in time, I'd like to accrue some more, although they're also now very expensive. So no, I've been doing lots and lots of walking around Newport Pagnell and the wider part of Milton Keynes. It's been very pleasant. I mean, obviously, the weather has been relatively conducive to that. I'm even getting better at walking past pubs and not going into them. So, I mean, it's progress all round in that regard. And as that's much, much, much less expensive than moving my car any distance at all, that's largely what I've been up to. And I mean, I've obviously been doing some work for you guys that's going to feature and so on and so forth. But the weather has been not uniformly dreadful. So I've made it out and I'm just trying to be momentarily less fat. So, you know, that's about as far as it goes.
What's your MPG at the minute?
Oh God, the car's wedged firmly in eco mode. Over the course of today, I have done 30.2 miles to the gallon.
Oh, that's not too bad.
No, not for pootling around town, but it just basically means putting it the eco mode. It allows it to freewheel at idle.
Yeah,
or you can just lift off and it doesn't. It physically pops both clutches. So provided that you don't mind flirting constantly with driving into the back of people, it's actually quite an effective way of moving around.
Yeah,
but yeah, it was just a mere 184 a litre for super unleaded yesterday. Brilliant. I mean, absolute bargain.
I was on the motorway yesterday. It was over £2.
God.
£2.08 a litre. It's getting ridiculous at the minute. So to combat that, I'm test driving a new car tomorrow.
Does it presumably run on electricity?
Nope.
Iron brew.
Oh, okay then.
Yeah, iron brew.
Is that cheaper? Maybe.
Probably. Probably.
Yeah, probably. No, it's a ST, Puma ST. There's a new model coming in. They're running out the old model at the minute. So there's lots of deals at the minute on the on the old model. We need something practical. We need something to shove the dog in the back of, and we need something to go long runs up to Scotland and so on. And I need to drive something that I'm not going to be bored to tears in. So it's got
all
peppy
very
little performance. Hopefully I can get hold of the green one, because I quite like the mean green. So I'm going to go and test it tomorrow and see what I think. We did look at a Mach-E.
They're extremely expensive, but they're extremely good.
Unbelievably expensive. Even the cheapest one was about £700 a month. It's just, no, I'm sorry. Even doing the sums in terms of what you'd save in fuel, you wouldn't save that much, actually. So you certainly wouldn't be able to save enough to afford something like that every month. So yeah, I'm going to go and have a look at that. I was at a rock festival on Saturday. Well, it's Rock the 80s. It's not really a rock festival. But it was excellent. It was really, really good. It was in Sunderland. It was outdoors. We were sat in the picnic chairs. We took our picnic, and there was loads of bands on. Scritti Politti, Bad Manners, Tony Hadley, Wet Wet Wet. It's all bands from the 80s. I mean, some of them were bloody awful. Some of them were really, really good. So that was entertaining. And what else? Oh, yeah. So I've had a bad back for a while. And I sit a lot looking at a computer. And I have been looking at standing desks for a while. I don't know if anybody out there who listens to the podcast has changed the way that they work and stand up while they're working and so on. But I wanted to give it a go. It's been quite expensive looking at desks and so on. I didn't want to give it a go and then find that I didn't like standing up working. And another thing is we need something to shoot products on, a nice desk to shoot products on and do piece to cameras and that kind of thing with the products in front of us. So I've been looking at a standing desk, and it just so happens that Madesite reached out to me a couple of weeks ago and offered to send one for review. Now, we don't review furniture. So I had to decline on that, but I said, if you're still keen to send one out, I'd love to try it. So they sent one out free of charge. I haven't paid for it. So, be genuine up front and honest with you. So it arrived. I've set it up. It took a little while to set up, as these things always do, because I've got electric motors and all the rest of it. And I think Stuart's showing some footage at the minute. But it was the S2 Pro from Madesite in white with white legs and a white top. The reason for that is filming. It's easier to bounce light off white. Dark color products like disc players and that kind of thing will look better on a white surface. So that was one of the reasons. In terms of actually using it to stand up and work, I haven't done that yet. I've only just set it up in the last few days, but I'm really quite impressed. It's not mega expensive. I think it's about 350 quid or something like that. So, and it works the way you think it works. You set your height, you program it in, basically by just clicking the M button and then a number associated to what height you want it. And it goes up and it comes down, and you can stand up and work at a reasonable height, or you can sit down and work at the desk as well. And it looks like it'll take a lot of weight, which is good for me because I always have Genelec monitors when I'm editing videos. I have another monitor in terms of video editing that's color accurate, so I can check what we're doing and so on. So it looks like it's going to be big enough. It looks like it's going to work with the filming and so on. So I guess I can give you an update in a few weeks and whether it'll solve my back problems or not. But certainly sitting at a computer every day, a lot of us have started working from home. I've been working from home for 20 years, but a lot of people have started working from home. And this is one of the issues that a lot of people are running into, is sitting all day at a computer is not healthy. So thanks to Madesite. Again, they're not sponsoring the podcast or anything like that. They just reached out and said, would you like to try one for review? I declined on the review, but I am trying one up and I'll talk about it on the podcast and so on. And again, they sent it free of charge. So thank you very much to them. And there is a link in the description if you're interested in having a look. Again, this is not sponsored or anything. It's just a company was nice enough to reach out, and I'm trying something to try and get round my bad back. So thanks to them. Right. Jules, what have you been up to?
Well, Ian will appreciate this. Week last Saturday, played at Carrow Road in a fans charity
that time
match.
somebody did.
Somebody played it. Yeah. Well, yeah, you got me there. Although, yeah, again, Phil, you'll appreciate this. Had a blinder of a game, and our left midfielder said, "I'll have you over Billy Gilmore any day." Yeah, and the guy's a ex-chef at Delia's Canary Catering, so he's going to know, isn't he? He's
Yeah,
going to have the inside knowledge. So yeah, I was absolutely knackered after 20 minutes, to be honest, and but we got through 45 and came back from 3-0 down, 3-all, 2 assists, fantastic. Dreaming about it since. So that's what. Then I got a cold and basically flat out for the last week or so, coughing my guts up.
Right.
So yeah,
But you've supported that team a very long time, and I guess playing on the actual pitch that your heroes play on, that must be a hell of an experience.
Oh, it's fantastic. For a fan to play on their own pitch, it's what I used to dream about as a kid. And then to be able to do that, in my 50s, so a bit past the peak, but it's a dream come true. It's fantastic.
Yeah, excellent. And was there much of a crowd there?
We're about 200. I mean, friends and family. Right. And the whole thing, we raised I think it was about 5-6 grand for charity overall.
Oh, excellent. Excellent.
So it was a really good evening. So yeah, terrific.
Excellent. Good stuff. And to wrap up on what we've been up to in the last 2 weeks, Ian, how many video games have you been playing then?
Just the 2.
Just the 2.
Yeah, just to defy all this talk about standing up, getting exercise and driving around all over the place, I've mostly been sat on my sofa playing video games. 2 games in question, mostly been playing a lot of No Man's Sky. Just a new expedition for that came out quite recently that runs for 6 weeks. Just as a public service announcement to anybody that saw No Man's Sky when it first came out and didn't think much to it, because it was a game that came out with quite a bit of hype, but it was just a small development team, so it's quite unfinished when it came out. But now, a few years on, they've thrown in loads of content, and if you didn't think much of it when it first came out, it's worth another look. That's all I'd say to anybody that might be interested in that.
Isn't it? It's had the greatest improvement in user ratings of any game that's ever had that user ratings process applied to it.
It absolutely wouldn't surprise me. It won a BAFTA, the BAFTA Gaming Awards recently for the. It's not called the most improved game. It's called for the best evolving game. So the game that's kind of continued to grow, and they're throwing free content on a regular basis. So it's like you play it for a while, and you can play it for 500 hours and get nowhere, and then you get bored. You go back to it, and there's always something new in there that you didn't play the first time. So it's kind of always worthwhile going back. And I think right now it's as polished and as much content as there's been in it. So it's, if you were tempted before but didn't really think there was enough to it, then it's definitely worth another look.
Okay.
The other game is called The Quarry, which is it's more of an interactive movie than a video game.
Oh, so it's not a mining simulator?
No, There's enough of those around already. It's more of actually a sort of a homage to kind of 80s slasher flicks with a classic kind of summer camp teenagers riddled with hormones and teenage angst, kind of.
I didn't know where you were going right there.
Killed off on a semi-regular basis, but the fact but it's got quite a nice thing because you play kind of all the characters on and off, and your goal basically is to keep them alive through making smart choices. So all the times when you're watching horror films, you think, "Oh man, these kids are so dumb, I'd survive that easily." It's kind of your chance to put that to the test. So that's in progress for a review, which will be going up on the site just as soon as I can. I would say finish it, but it's a game with kind of quite a lot of replay value because the choices you make all kind of, there's 128 different endings to it. So the choices you make all kind of fuel into these many different scenarios you can come up with. Just yesterday,
everybody dies, nobody dies, Scooby-Doo ending.
I had this situation where I could shoot someone. I thought, no, I'm playing good. I'm not going to shoot them. And then 10 seconds later, my character had the head cut off. So it was maybe I'll make a slightly better choice next time around. So there's a lot of replay shooting, but it's good fun. I'm enjoying it. But yeah, that's about the introduction.
All right. Okay.
How active I've been.
Well, there you go. We're caught up on what everything's been up to. So let's get on with the show, and hardware's coming up next.
If you'd like to support the AV Forums podcast on a regular basis, then why not become a patron? Head over to patreon.com/AV Forums to sign up. You can also make a one-off donation through the Super Chat or via streamlabs.com/AV Forums. All donations help us to improve the website and the podcasts. Thank you to all our supporters.
Okay, so before we get into hardware, and we've got lots to get through tonight, current competitions, and because the movies team are not around this evening, we've incorporated some of those competitions into tonight's lineup. So Ed, why don't you tell us what we can win?
Right. You can win 3 times 100 gift cards, £100 gift cards for brawnaudio.com. So I think that's 3 separate prizes of a £100 gift card. You can win copies of 8 titles from Mark's top 10 Blu-rays for June. High Crime, Kill 'Em All, Card Counter, Licorice Pizza, which is awful, Extreme Prejudice, and Criterion's June titles. You can win The Batman on Blu-ray. You can win a limited edition box set of Drive in 4K and a copy of Stephen King's Cat's Eyes in 4K. To enter for any of those glorious prizes, head over to avforums.com/competitions to enter. All competitions are open to eligible AV Forums members resident in the UK. And we've got some previous winners as well, I'm delighted to say. Flipfella won the podcast exclusive Nicolas Cage's Pig on Blu-ray. That's a fine prize. I genuinely enjoyed that film. Carrowood won Rules of the Game on DVD. Over the Fence won Days of Bagnold Summer on Blu-ray. Crown won the podcast exclusive X-Men Cerebro collection on Blu-ray. Lotus and Lan won Scream on 4K. Bopper won a copy of Belfast on Blu-ray. And Becky I won a copy of Dear Evan Hansen on Blu-ray. So well done to you all, and I hope you enjoy your fabulous prizes.
Yep, excellent. Well done, everybody. And of course, there's lots more competitions there. Some that we didn't mention as well, because we don't have time to go through them all. So head over to AV Forums and find some and get entering. Good odds. Right. So let's move on to AV news and a little bit of bad news, Ian.
Yeah. Reports suggesting that Auro Technologies, creator of the Auro 3D audio system, has filed for bankruptcy. It's one of those stories where immediately it sounds like it's bad news, because obviously a company going into insolvency is bad news. But there's kind of seeds of optimism in there as well. First of all, parent company, Galaxy Studios, seems to be fine in itself. And word is that the bankruptcy proceedings were taken more as a precautionary measure rather than a reactionary one. Essentially, COVID-19 wasn't a good time for them or any of the companies that they deal with. So obviously, times have been tight. And word is that they're keeping all employees, all patents are being retained, and there's talk of kind of a restructuring process taking place. So whether this will involve a new version of Auro Technologies, whether it will include Auro 3D as a primary product, or whether it's going to have to be moved around, shipped around, or quite exactly what that will entail, we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, I mean, the bad news is, first of all, Auro Technologies does look like it's filing for bankruptcy, but there is optimism that Galaxy Studios will be doing something new with the operations that it possesses.
Okay, so I mean, Galaxy Studios is a separate company, so we just need to make that clear. It's Auro 3D, Auro Technologies that's gone insolvent. So Wilfred Van Balen, he's will be well known to some of our audience. He's been in lots of our videos. We actually went out to Galaxy Studios back in 2014 when the format was launching, and I did a full video which you can find on our YouTube channel talking about the technology. So if you're not aware of what Auro 3D is, it's basically an immersive audio format that competes against DTS:X and of course Dolby Atmos. The problem that Auro 3D has always had, in my opinion, is that it was fighting a losing battle against two big giants who had lots of resources behind them and who could take on challengers in that field. And of course, Dolby, everybody knows who Dolby are, a huge company. If you're going to take them on, you need to have a vast investment behind you, and you need to have something genuine technology-wise and so on. They had the genuine technology. Auro 3D was incredibly it had one of those
sophisticated.
It was sophisticated, and it was sophisticated in a way that it wasn't just a case of having speakers all around the room. They'd actually done a lot of research into what the perfect angles for the speakers were, perfect format, that sound above you is not necessarily where you want sound to be. You get occasional reverb and echoes above your head, but in most respects, it's up until about 60, 70 degrees in terms of where you'll hear overhead effects. And that was the way they set their system up. You had the horizontal plane, just the same as Atmos and DTS:X. But then you had the height channels and a voice of God speaker, which very rarely worked. It was only for flyovers of airplanes and that kind of thing. But everything was more on this plane where obviously you could hear the sound directly and so on. And it was an excellent system. We had lots of demonstrations. I've got equipment here that can do Auro 3D. The problem was the speaker placement was different to Atmos in terms of to get the best out of it. You needed to have the speaker set a different way to Atmos, which DTS manages to marry in because the speaker placements are roughly the same between those two formats. Auro were a little bit different, so there was that. But the main problem was coming into a marketplace where you have a dominant player like Dolby, and to a lesser extent DCS, you are going to struggle to get people on board, and that was the problems that they ran into. There are releases out there that are in Auro 3D, but they're not of major. They're not major AA titles or anything like that. It's more European film studios and that kind of thing, which is a shame. If you haven't watched the video, go watch the video, because Galaxy Studios, I've been to Skywalker Ranch, and it's like the European version of Skywalker Ranch. It is so impressive. It's just one massive facility. Lots of mixing stages, dubbing stages, color correction, grading suites, all under the one roof. And of course, it has massive studios, recording studios as well. So you could fit a full orchestra into the main recording studio and record your sound score for the film as you're mixing the film in another room, as you're grading it in another. Fantastic facility. And of course, Auro was Wilfred's little baby. And unfortunately, it sounds like things have gotten tough for them. So we send our best wishes, and hopefully Auro can come out the other end in some form or another. Right. Anything hi-fi news?
Yeah, a couple of new speaker systems to talk about, which I'll do purely in the order they came out rather than any order of preference. So I'll start with the Klipsch Reference Premiere. There's a new range of speakers come out from Klipsch, much like they've done recently with other ranges, just updating them with the latest trademark tech that the company has, putting in a lot of new high quality materials as well, just to make them obviously bigger and better, which is the whole idea. New range is made up of 11 new speakers, which includes 4 towers, 2 bookshelf speakers, 3 centers, and 2 surround speakers. I won't go through the full list because that's all up on the website, and it'll take a very long time to run through all the prices and the product names. So yeah, I'll just advise people to jump on the website, take a look at that news story, and see the full lineup for themselves.
I mean, these have always been big bang for your buck, so I have every confidence that these will be deeply impressive. If you've got the room for a pair of Klipsch Floorstanders, they're not the same as the classic speakers that they still make. They're not quite as absurdly sensitive as that, but they do tend to go a long way on not that much power. So I've always considered them exceptionally good AV speakers. So yeah, well worth a look. I imagine that they'll be extremely impressive.
Yeah, Klipsch always are. Anything else, Ian?
Yeah, could follow a similar line really in terms of a company that does well with sort of impressive and quite stylish products. KEF has announced an upgraded LSX II wireless hi-fi stereo system. The wireless factor comes courtesy of the same W2 platform that was seen on the LS50 wireless 2 system. And there's plenty of other sort of wired and wireless connection options on offer there. As you'd expect, typically stylish design. Comes with a bespoke variant of KEF's 11th generation UniQ driver array, bunch of other features as well, room ready certified for one. And that will be priced for a pair of those 2 speakers, will be priced at £1,199, and they become available from the 23rd of June. So it's quite a bit of money, but as KEF typically do, they're quite impressive looking speakers and hopefully good sounding ones too.
Yeah, to be fair, if they've made the same, it's lesser. I mean, the original one sounded extremely good, so I have no doubt in my mind that this one's going to sound excellent. If they've made some of the same functionality gains with this model of LSX, it's going to be a phenomenal product. Yes, I have asked for a pair. I've also, because somebody asked, I have asked for the LS60, the wireless towers. God only knows how I'm going to fit them in, but I'll work that out when they get here. but they are. I mean, it's not so. I mean, KEF has always been good at the speakers. That wasn't the thing. It's incredibly impressive how quickly these active wireless designs are smoothing off the rough edges that were present in the first gens and being a really creditable solution to more conventional just add speakers all in ones. I mean, that's why the LS50 Wireless 2 got the Editor's Choice Award in that regard last time round. So I'm looking forward to testing both, and we'll see how they stack up.
Okay, excellent. Well, I think we've covered all the AV news. Sorry, I was a little bit rude. I didn't ask for anybody else's opinion on the Auro story. Did you want to come in, Jules?
Only to say that as I go around calibrating, I very rarely saw anybody set up for Auro 3D. Yeah. I mean, there's a reflection on the number of titles that were available with that format on that, probably, but it's just such a rare thing. I mean,
it's an unfortunate reflection that technological worth, regrettably, is not and rarely ever has been sufficient to gain overall penetration into a market segment.
Betamax.
Well, I mean, obviously, Auro 3D doesn't even have a porn segment, sort of. So, the odds really were against them.
You would have thought that would have been the European angle, wouldn't you? No, unfortunately not. I mean, one of the things that really did impress me with the format is the upmixer. You could send it a mono track, which Wilfred did with us with a demo, and amazing what that upmixer could do in terms of creating a stereo sound field from a mono recording, the way it worked it out on the fly and did that. So it wasn't just about surround effects and all the rest of it. The little upmixer, I keep forgetting the name of it. It's got Auro in there somewhere. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but it was a fantastic upmixer. So hopefully there's some life left in that technology. So let's move on to some product reviews. And before we do that, because we're going to talk about audio product reviews, so before we talk about audio, I'm going to talk about video. Let's go to the Samsung S95B, the QD-OLED. Yes, I know my review has taken a little while to get here. That's because the released a firmware update. So you may remember that Vincent found some issues with filmmaker mode. I was able to confirm that doing our own tests at this side with a UK model. I believe he imported a US model. So we could tell that they were doing the same thing. They were running the same firmware, which was 12.04, if I remember correctly. So a new firmware has been launched. And unfortunately, in terms of all the measurements and stuff that I've taken, they are now redundant. I'm going to have to do all the testing again and run most of my tests again. And it's a good job that I did take that line, because I have found a few things that are a result of the firmware update. So one of those things are that filmmaker mode is now correct in terms of accuracy. PQ EOTF tracking is correct. It does it to the ST2084 standard. So there's no over brightening going on there. There's no differences of window size. So if you put in 8%, 11%, 18% window, whatever window size you put in, it will measure correctly. And the problem was on the last firmware was if you put a 10% window up, it measured accurately, but then put a 9% or an 8% window and it measured inaccurately. So that was the issue that was highlighted to start with. That has now been fixed. I can confirm that that's been fixed as well, having done those tests to make sure that that is the case. So that's great. Well done to Samsung for listening and fixing that. It would have been nice to have a product come out that didn't have that, because it did point to, is this TV cheating? Does it know that a 10% window is being applied, and is it applying what it thinks that person putting the 10% window in wants to see? So, we don't know if that was the case. Evidence is circumstantial to that, but that issue has been fixed in firmware, so it shouldn't be an issue anymore. One thing I have noticed though, and it's a little bit concerning, and obviously once I can get measurable results that I can feed back to Samsung, I will be doing that, is the ABL seems to be very aggressive. I mean, overly aggressive in terms of what it's doing. An example of that was I was running the TV, playing a Netflix film, sound turned down, but I tend to do that in the background and then come in and sit for 5 minutes and watch and let the sets run in properly. On this occasion, it was what's the Ryan Reynolds sci-fi thing? It's going completely off my head. That Adam Project. So I had that running. It was fine to start with in HDR. Went back about halfway through the film. I'd been doing other jobs with my back to TVs. You can see how they're set up here, and this is my work setup. So I turned around, and it was incredibly dim, the image. So normally, if that happens with ABL, if you bring up the Netflix menu, it'll fix itself and it'll come. Didn't do that. It was still dark, so I had to actually come out of the whole application and then start Netflix again, and then start the film again. And it started where it had left off and back to where it should be in terms of HDR picture. It's done this on numerous occasions, but it hasn't done it in a repeatable fashion. So some days it will play fine and you won't see any ABL issues. Other days, everything you watch, if you leave it for 20 to 40 minutes, it really darkens. So there is an issue there. It's something I'm trying to get to the bottom of with further testing. And because it's not repeatable, when I set the camera up for 20 minutes and let the camera run for 20 minutes and the battery deplete and it doesn't do it, it's quite frustrating. So I am trying to capture it on camera as well so I can feed all that back in. What do I think? Now I've spent some time, watched some movies and so on. It's brilliant. It really is. I mean, it's an OLED TV, so you've got a good starting point. It is still a little bit oversaturated out of filmmaker modes in the movie mode and so on. And I think a lot of people are mistaking that for brightness, color brightness. It oversaturates, which can trick you into thinking that you're seeing more color volume, and you're not. But there is more color volume to be had. So it's a shame that a lot of the picture presets out of the box are cooked to look a certain way. You know, they're cooked so they look good on a showroom floor. It's not really how you want to be watching images at home if you want to see accuracy and so on. In terms of accuracy, it now gets accurate. It now looks really, really good. It's a stunning TV for a first generation of the technology as well. It's very, very good. I'm really excited to get the Sony, and the Sony should be coming in very soon to see what happens there, because they really do a good job, Sony. They are very much creator's intent, which is almost the opposite of what Samsung go for popularity. Sony go for accuracy. So it'll be interesting to see that. But it's looking like a great TV. I'm hoping to get the review finished by the end of this week. And one of the questions was the Netflix app on the TV? Yes, it was the built-in Netflix app. It wasn't a separate source. So it was through the Tizen system that I was using it. Again, I can get it to repeat. It's just not repeatable on a consistent basis. It's very picky to get it to trigger. But again, we want to try and figure out what is actually happening so we can feed that back to Samsung and have them correct it. But in all other respects, it seems to be performing the way you would expect it to perform. It's great for a new technology. There are quirks. There are things it doesn't quite do correctly, and things like motion and so on are improved, but they're still not up to the standard of Panasonic and Sony and Philips in those terms. So there are little weak areas with it, but overall, as a package, it looks like it's going to be a cracking TV. And like I say, I'm going to try and work through and try and get the initial review anyway, because we purchased this one. It's hanging around for a few months yet, so we'll try and get the initial review up and the initial videos and settings and so on up by the end of the week. So that's what I wanted to cover there. Very quickly, Panorama 3 soundbar. If you're looking for a soundbar that has an external subwoofer, external speakers and so on, this is not for you. Bowers & Wilkins know that they don't have more than one HDMI input. It's designed that way. It is an expensive soundbar, but it's designed to be a standalone. And I think a lot of the comments, it's an AV forum, you're bound to get the comments that we have gotten on that. I just wanted to make it perfectly clear that Bowers are aware of the fact it doesn't run on external speakers or external subwoofers. It's been designed to be a standalone unit. And taken in that context, and that's what Bowers say it should do, that's exactly how it was tested. And it is really impressive as a standalone. Is it expensive? Absolutely. It's a Bowers and Wilkins product. You are paying money for it.
Like Stellar Artois.
But at the same time, build quality is superb. The components are superb. So, you pick your poison when it comes to these things. If you want a nice, sleek, well-designed, well-put together soundbar that doesn't need a subwoofer, it doesn't have external speakers for surrounds and all the rest of it. You just want that nice look, but you also want something that works well with music as well as movies. It's a cracking soundbar. It really is. Yes, it's expensive, but I think you're getting what you're paying for there, especially if you like the Bowers approach to things and you maybe want to tie it into an ecosystem and so on. I guess the only odd thing there is that it doesn't talk to formation in any way whatsoever. It's completely separate to that interface. So again, it would have been nice to have that.
I sense I understand why, but yeah, that's probably a conversation for another time.
Yep. So if you want to find out more about that soundbar, because it is good, although you're paying money for it, go read the review is up. So let's stick with speakers. Let's go to Q Acoustics, because they really have been knocking it out of the park for a number of years now.
They don't tend. I mean, obviously, unless they move away from and do something radical, because the Concept 300, not Concept 300, I can't remember which one it is. The wireless active speakers, they were more interesting, but again, that's because Q Acoustics took some very defined decisions. The Concept 50 is not a radical. Well, insofar as the technology involved that Q Acoustics has been evolving is quite unusual in itself, but it's very much in keeping with what they've been doing for nearly 10 years now. And as you might expect, it's extremely good. It's not perfect. I don't want to go. The review will go up and it covers lots and lots of things. Sonically, this is an outstanding loudspeaker. It's extremely impressive. It suffers from an issue that I have seen once or twice with various bits of kit over the years, and ironically, sometimes more often than not with Q Acoustics kit. It's a slender Floorstander. Now, there are rules about selling slender Floorstanders in the United Kingdom in 2022. They have to pass a stability test. They don't flatten your children or pets. And there are various different ways of going about this. If you look at stock photos of the Concept 50, you will see it has effectively a sort of chrome outrigger, which attaches to the back of the loudspeaker. Now, choosing my words carefully, I'm not going to name any names, but a number of loudspeaker companies recognize that the stability solutions that they come up with take up a lot of space and are rather ungainly. So with a certain degree of breathtaking cynicism, you can simply attach the spikes directly to the holes where the plinth would go. Q Acoustics, it's all or nothing, baby. You have to use this big chrome boomerang at the back of the loudspeaker, and it gives it. I was trying to work this out. I think the only thing I've tested in recent history that has a larger footprint than the Concept 50 is the Ellipson Heritage XLS 15, which is enormous. It takes up a surprising amount of space because the curve to the boomerang means that it doesn't take up exactly the amount of space that you think it might be, or allow you to slide it behind things or so on and so forth. So it requires an enormous amount of room. And ironically, the speaker itself does not require an enormous amount of room. It's actually very civilized, even when quite close to boundaries. Now, I don't want to have an over-downer on this because the sonic performance is excellent, and most people are unlike me, and they don't try and run two pairs of loudspeakers side by side. But it sonically, I can't felt. Oh, there you go. Well, you can just see that garners a highly recommended badge and comes 9 out of 10. If you're viewing this, it's extremely good. The other thing I would say is that it's extremely good, but where the Concept 30, the stand mount that I reviewed first, that's £1,000. Sorry, no, that's a £900 speaker, so it's £100 cheaper than some of the key competition, and it's better than all of them. This at £2,000 is pretty much price equivalent to key competition, sometimes fractionally more expensive than key competition. It's fractionally more expensive than the Sonos Faber Lumina 3, which is roughly the same sort of configuration. So it doesn't have that slight price advantage, and it's not quite as breathtakingly brilliant. But I mean, we are talking degrees of excellence here. It's still a phenomenal loudspeaker, and I did thoroughly enjoy spending time with it. You would be cutting your nose off to spite your face if you are looking for a speaker in this price point not to at least organize a demonstration of it. Then you can have a look at the foot. I mean, it's a fabulous piece of industrial design. It's just one of those cases of a fabulous piece of industrial design that I don't think necessarily had much contact with the outside world before it was implemented. But by all means, if you are shopping for a speaker at this price point, do get a listen, because they are sensational. There is a matching center speaker, so it could well be exactly what you're looking for. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I do think that its little brother is very slightly better, though.
Ed, can I just confirm you said it does have a center speaker?
It does have a center speaker. There is a matching center speaker in the range.
Yeah, it's just you're breaking up.
There's no dedicated effect. Sorry, I've turned everyone else's internet off, so obviously I'm having local issues because that's all the internet I've got. No, it has got a matching center speaker. There's no effects or surround speakers beyond the stand mount, so that's something that you might have to shop for separately.
Okay, good stuff. And that review will be up soon. It's not published just yet, but it will be up in the next few days. So keep an eye on AV Forums for that. You can read the full review and find out exactly what Ed thinks. Right, so let's move on to our calibration discussion for the evening. We're going to go over to Jules. We did white balance last time out.
Indeed.
That's an important aspect when it comes to picture quality, but also just as important is gamma. So let's start with SDR first of all, because the vast majority of people are still watching SDR, and this is where gamma, initially came about because of SDR content and CRT displays. So maybe explain the beginnings of it, and then we'll move through to HDR and PQ EOTF and so on.
Yeah, I mean, gamma, in basic layman's term, is how your display moves from black through to white. So it's all those shades of grey in between. And all of those have a particular luminance level. In the world of CRT, which, like the dinosaurs, went on for 250 million years, that was all related to how a CRT and cathode ray tube performed in a very non-linear fashion. And it approximated to a power law of 2.4. And getting your gamma right is really, really important, because we spoke about, you say, white balance last time around, which is the tint of the display. The gamma also is part of this canvas that we often talk about, that you need to get right before you can work on color. So your colors are placed on top of a gray scale, which obviously has a white balance to it, but also these elements of luminance as they go from black through to white. So when you put your colors on top of those shades of gray, then you'll find that the colors change. The luminance of the colors change along with the steps going up from black through to white. Now, the reference SDR gamma is a 2.4 power law, not as often has been said, particularly by a particular review site who shall not be named. 2.2. 2.2 is not a reference gamma. It's not what we're using. I've just been contacted by a grading studio for this week. Can you come do a 2.4 gamma calibration? 2.4 is everywhere. There was a slight interlude with BT 1886, which came about as grading studios were moving from CRT displays to other types of displays like LCD, and there was a need to basically be backwards compatible with what CRT had been doing. And so given that CRT 2.4 was basically tied together, there was a need to introduce a standard for LCDs and other kinds of displays that would mean that the content would be backwards compatible. But the real drawback of that is it's based around CRT, and here we are, 2022, so as we have moved into HDR, there have been new standards. So we have something called ST2084, which based on it's We've even changed the way we call gamma. It's EOTF now, or electro-optical transfer function, and it's no longer based around CRT technology, but on perceptual quantization. That is how the human visual system works. So we've moved into new territory with HDR and gamma.
Okay, I thought you were going on there.
All right, I just thought I'd let you come in there, Phil.
No, and then I thought you were having Ed issues there because you got very still, and I'm thinking, oh no, we've got another issue here. But no, yeah. So I mean, that takes us up to the present day, and one of the reasons that there is a lot of confusion is that a lot of people are still stuck thinking about gamma as a curve and as a function, which when you move over to, like you say, PQ EOTF, it's slightly different. It's a lot more linear in terms of what you're actually and what the display is showing. And that's great because digital displays are linear and it ties in well, and it's been designed that way. So let's take it a step forward and let's go with HDR. Why is, and I hear this all the time, oh, HDR, it's the Wild West. There's no standards for HDR and so on. There are standards for HDR, and the PQ EOTF is one of those standards. So walk us through that and why it's important.
What standards for HDR?
Standards for the HDR, and why we should be sticking to ST2084, and why a display should be able to show that.
Yeah, it's not it's not. Things are still being worked on. It's a new format. We've had SDR gamma for a hell of a long time, since the 1930s, and it was all based on CRT, as we said. We need standardization across the industry. You can't have a million and one different formats, format wars between gammas and etc. So it's all part of moving forward with, as you say, digital displays and the ability to have a linear output. In fact, interesting about the CRT is that they made it was non-linear, so it was a curve, but in fact the cameras did the opposite in order to give you a linear response on your display. Of course, now we actually have displays who can do it naturally. They can do a linear gamma response naturally. So now the interesting thing is that BBC and NHK went away and developed something called HLG, hybrid log gamma, just to confuse everybody even more, which works actually in a pretty neat way, doesn't it? It detects the peak output of your display and allows you to send the same broadcast effectively to the little old granny who's still got her SDR TV, and you who with your HDR TV, you can watch the same broadcast, and one person seeing it in HDR and one person seeing it in SDR effectively, because of the way that HLG works.
Yeah, so I mean, it's one of these subjects that we could fill a whole podcast with. So apologies that we are kind of rushing through this, but I think just getting the basics right and talking about standards, because we see lots of comments on the internet saying, well, you're talking about things that are 30, 40 years old and Rec 709's an old format and all the rest of it. It all exists for reasons, and the reasons are that at the end of the day, it helps you get the best possible picture quality. And as things move on, and we are moving on with things, you're going to get new technologies come along where we can picture quality becomes better because the displays are capable of showing everything that can be shown. It's one of the reasons why I think 4K has become popular at the time it's become popular, because of HDR also being available at the same time. Now, HDR could be on a 1080 transfer. It's not just a 4K thing. HDR, it could work on any resolution, really. It's all about how when you're transferring film from film, the limitations were always the display devices. So when things were transferred from film and so on, they were done in such a way that it mimicked the display, and it was thought, well, that's not important, we'll throw that away. because the display is never going to be able to show it, and you're never going to be able to see that on the end display. We've gone well beyond that now, and everything that is captured can be displayed and displayed properly. And gamma is one of those main items that you have to get right, because one of the mistakes that people think of is that gamma is a cutoff. If it's 2.2, then there's some kind of cutoff. The camera's done it at 2.2 or whatever. That's not how it works. The camera captures everything, and then you work on that within this envelope of standards. And like you say, at different luminance levels, it should hit different things, and you should be able to see different things. It's why you get comments on forums, and again, we're not going to go into it in too much detail tonight, but it's why you get comments on, well, my Sony projector is able to show the brickwork in that wall behind that character in this scene, yet I saw a friend's JVC projector and there was no brickwork being seen whatsoever. And then I looked at it on my OLED TV and I could only see a little bit of the brickwork and so on. And what you normally find is that the wrong gamma has been dialed in. And because you're seeing the detail, your gamma is too low a setting, so a 2.2 or a 2.1 or even a 1.8, some setups that I've seen. And of course, you are going to see lots of detail in the shadows because your gamma is set incorrectly. It's too bright at the lower end. So this is the reason why it's really important, and why in certain things, yes, if you manipulate the gamma, you're suddenly seeing more shadow detail, but actually you're not supposed to be seeing that shadow detail. You're washing out the picture. So that's why it's important.
Now, what we can do with SDR is, depending on the ambient light in the room, is we can switch out from a 2.4 gamma to a 2.2, which will elevate the shadow detail, because when you're in a brighter room, your eyes will close down. You can't see the shadow detail that's been designed in the film or the TV program to be seen in the dark room. So we can do that, but you can't do that with HDR because they're absolute values. So you either have to break the EOTF. That's the electro-optical transfer function. It's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it? But
it's a lot easier when it was gamma.
Gamma is so much easier to say. Yeah. Of course, if you get too much gamma, you turn green and get very angry.
That's it. That's it. So we're going to leave it at that point there. But again, if you got questions, if you want to know a little bit more about these subjects, we will circle back around and get more technical as the weeks go on, and get a little bit more in depth and spend a little bit more time. This is basically the introduction into separate things that make up a great image, and why they're important, and why just because someone on YouTube has got a nice colourful image and is selling it to you for $5, it's not accurate, it's not proper, and there's a reason why you want accuracy in your images. It's not because you want them dark and grey and the colours all washed out. It's because you should be seeing the material as it's supposed to be seen. And that can be incredibly bright as well. So we're going to leave at that point this subject. So we're going to move on very quickly. We're going to go to Ed, if Ed's still there.
Yes, I am. Sorry, I'm just hanging on by my fingertips here. It's
all right. Okay, so we're going to go and get his album, vinyl, and playlist before we tell you what we've been watching on the telly. So off you go, Ed.
Right, album of the week is it is new. I promise you. If you listen to it, you may not think it's new. This is a Canadian band called the Sheepdogs, and please don't turn off at this point. It is worth continuing on this one. They've been around for some time, and this album, Outer Sight, came out earlier in June, and it could have just as easily been released in June 1974. But the thing is, it's which band could have released it, because the more you listen, the more you realize that these guys effortlessly stitch together so many different sort of hallmark sounds from a number of different places, and then much more importantly create some absolutely great tunes to go with it. I really, really like this album. It doesn't overstay its welcome. It's thoroughly enjoyable. There will be physical releases of it, but I don't know yet if they're going to be physical releases outside of Canada. But that's why it's album of the podcast, because it's on all major UK streaming services. And I think it's absolutely brilliant. And I'm probably stupid enough that, provided I don't have to spend all of my money on Super Unlimited, I will probably try and get a vinyl copy in from Canada. However, vinyl release month because of the podcast, rather, because it's not constrained by such rules. As you know, every now and again, I have a distressing preponderance for world music. This time is no exception. Vieux Farcatore is the son of the legendary Ali Farcatore, who essentially brought West African music to wider attention in the late 1980s. He is just as transcendently talented as his dad was. He's been releasing some absolutely brilliant stuff over the years. If you are expecting something radically new from him, then, well, no, it doesn't. It's all much of a muchness, but it's just tremendous musicianship. It's always beautifully recorded. And the reason it is the vinyl release, my copy hasn't turned up yet, so I'm afraid I am doing this on supposition, but I have never had a bad pressing of this guy, or indeed any of his label mates. It's very, very beautifully mastered and recorded, and it's always very, very carefully pressed. Once again, if you don't want to dip straight in on just buying the vinyl blind, which is, fair enough, it is on all major UK streaming services. And I find it particularly relaxing because I don't have a single clue what he's singing about, because obviously it's not a language that I'm in any way conversant with. I just thoroughly enjoy it. So that is the vinyl of the podcast. Playlist, ironically, we discussed beforehand that as none of us have really bothered watching Stranger Things as yet, we're not really going to discuss it. But Qobuz, don't miss a trick on this. They have compiled a 70-track, 4-hour playlist of things what are in and inspired by Stranger Things. So if you're an 80s
anything
music
from
fan,
the 80s. Any 80s electronic
I think
music.
it's thematically streamlined to be the same sort of overt pop culture sort of reference thing that you were talking about earlier on. Nevertheless, there's some great tracks on there, and it's always good to drive to, good to work to, so on and so forth. It's not been a vintage period for playlists. As the streaming services cut back on editorial staff in the vain pursuit of actually trying to make some money, there's just less people flushing around the system to knock these things up. But I enjoyed listening to that one. It doesn't break any radical ground. If you don't have Qobuz, you can replicate exactly the same thing by hitting 80s playlist on your streaming service, and you'll get pretty much the same thing. So don't sweat this one too much. But just remember, I mean, the 80s had many failings, but it musically probably one of the strongest decades going. So
I'd agree
get stuck in and enjoy it.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Ed. Stuff there that I'm definitely going to go and check out as soon as I've got some time. Right, to wrap up quickly tonight, what have we been watching on the TV? So as you said, Stranger Things 4, yet to start it. I meant to start it way before this podcast. I've had 2 weeks, in fact, where I thought, I'll get that started, get watched, and just, time's gotten way ahead of me. I haven't managed to do it. And before we came on, we discussed it. None of us have seen it. So we'll skip over that one. We'll come back to it in a few weeks' time. But Kenobi. Is anybody watching Obi-Wan Kenobi? Yeah. I
don't know why I'm watching it.
Did we need it?
No. Well, again, it cements the problem that if you have a character that needs to be alive for a canonical sequence later on in the Star Wars timeline, there's no jeopardy. I mean, what they're going to do? Are they going to kill him and then say, "Oh, actually, it's his mate Brian down in the cantina pretending to be Obi-Wan Kenobi in A New Hope"? It's possible. And to be honest, that would be a shark jump I could actually get behind.
You're right. It takes a lot of the jeopardy out of it. It takes a lot of the risk and all the rest of it out of it. The other thing is, and for me, I've really noticed it with this series is the fact that you have to have certain characters, or they feel like that you have to have certain characters in this story. Was there any need to have the young version of a character? I'm not going to spoil, but was there any reason for that character to have been kidnapped and suddenly have a storyline surrounding that? It just seems very, very forced to me. Don't get me wrong. The money's on the screen. It looks great. It sounds great. The effects are ropey in places. You can see where the budget's been cut. But again, it feels like that universe. They've nailed that. But it just comes down to the writing and the fact of, do we actually need to see what's going on? What do you think, Jules? Have you been watching it?
I haven't, no. I've got into a new Netflix documentary series called Keep Sweet. which is horrific. Basically, it's about the fundamentalist Latter-day Saints, and
it's Ray of Sunshine, eh?
It's polygamy and all sorts of shenanigans going on in Utah. But it is absolutely shocking. But it's the kind of stuff I like, that kind of thing. Not polygamy, of course. I don't like polygamy. But as my wives will tell you, I'm not quite into that. But
yeah, good stuff.
But it's well worth a watch.
Excellent. Ian?
Well, it wasn't quite on Kenobi levels in terms of timing, but I started watching Blacklist because I missed it first time around because I think it was a Sky exclusive in the UK when it first came out.
Yeah.
Just came up on Amazon Prime a little while ago. But unfortunately for me, it came out at the same time as Blacklist Redemption came out, which has 3 of the bad guys from Blacklist slapped on the front cover of it. So before I'd even started watching the first series, I instantly knew what was going to happen with 3 of the main characters. So I'd been spoiled throughout. So it's like, all right, it's like you know that Kenobi can't die. I know that those 3 characters can't die, and they're going to turn out to be good guys in the end. So it's kind of ruined it a little bit. But yeah, I got into that with the full intention of just seeing what it was like with, Stranger Things, The Boys, Better Call Saul, all that on my to-do list. And then it's like there's 8 or 10 seasons of it to have to work through. So I'm currently working through that. But I'm enjoying it. It's good to watch. And I kind of wish I'd caught it the first time around so it wasn't massively ruined for me.
Okay. Just the other one to mention, Ed, is the new Top Gear. Have you been watching it?
I have. Again, it doesn't break any new ground, does it? I mean,
No.
it's a perfectly pleasant way of passing an hour, and Andrew Flintoff is one
Mental.
of the most insanely brave human beings.
No, he's just mental.
I mean, if you wanted to do a sweepstake of someone that will die on screen, he's got to be. I mean, you normally think, boxers, so on and so forth. No, he's got to be well up there.
Yeah. The guy has.
I would
no
also
fear.
just give a hat tip to. I mean, I've loved the previous series of it as well. I haven't been watching Stranger Things, but Netflix has delivered a new series of Love, Death and Robots, which is conveniently short. They're only a maximum of 20 minutes long. The whole premise of Love, Death and Robots is that some of them will not appeal to you, some of them will. I have thoroughly enjoyed some of them. There's an episode involving rats in this 3rd season, which is just dementedly brilliant. So yes, I'd give that a nod. And could you do as I have, please? I mean, even if you don't end up buying it, I made contact over email with the man who did a lot of the music scores for many of these Love, Death and Robots. And I think some of them are absolutely sublime. Netflix owns them. So you need to convince Netflix to let it loose in the same way that the Stranger Things soundtrack was eventually released as a physical thing. So I would very much like to secure a copy of this, please. So do let the parties know, even if you don't end up buying it. I mean, that would be harsh, but I need a copy and I'm willing to do what it takes.
Okay. We now know what your handle is, Ed. We'll work on that. Right. And that's it for tonight. That's everything that we've been watching. That's everything we've been talking about. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. If you want to come back for more future podcasts, like I say, it's the 2nd and 4th Mondays of the month. So future podcasts, 27th of June, and the movies podcast will be back on the 27th of June, and also the 11th of July. That's the next 2 podcasts that are coming up. My thanks to Ian, Jules, and Ed. Thank you, guys.
Cheers, Phil.
And if you enjoyed the podcast, then please do give us a like. Consider subscribing to the channel. If you've got any questions, you can either put them in the live chat if you're watching us live on the evening, or of course you can email them to podcast@avforums.com. Don't forget to hit the notification bell if you have subscribed. It tells you every time we publish new content. There's lots of video reviews going up. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. You can bookmark avforums.com for latest reviews, news, and videos. There's a lot to say here. Plus, you can also give us a 5-star rating on whichever service you use to listen to the podcast. If it allows you to rate us, then please do. It is appreciated. My name is Phil Hinton. It's been great seeing you. Thank you very much for coming along, and we'll see you on the next podcast. Good night.